Okay, so welcome to this course on randomized algorithms. Right? So I see that there are a few people who have not officially joined, reply to the mail and joined for the course. If you're planning to credit, just email me and let me know, right, that you'll be crediting this course. So I'll just share my screen and this start. Uh, can you see my screen? Uh, is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you can just speak up because if I'm looking at the screen, then I'll probably not be able to see all the messages. So you can also just speak up if you want to just talk. I might miss the messages that you are typing in the chat. Okay. So this is CS6170, right? Randomized algorithms. My email address is given there. Just if you need anything, if you have any queries and you want to know anything about the course, just email me. Right, that is the email address. And the second important thing to note is this course web page. Right, all the updates regarding the course and right, related to the lecture schedules, videos, notes, assignments, everything will be in that web page. There is also the Moodle link from that page, so you can constantly check that web page. That is where all the information will be present. So please make sure that you check that page frequently. So that is the initial administrative matter. So so I let me just see. So there are people from BTechs. There are some new MS students, and right, and some the new MS PhD students as well. Right? So, so okay. So the basic prerequisite for this course, I'll just write it down before we start so that you know what it is. So the basic prerequisite that I for this course would be, UG algorithms, which all of you would have probably seen, and some basic discrete probability. Again, something that you would have seen either in your UG curriculum. This is the basic prerequisite for this course, and so let's start as follows. So what do you think is a randomized algorithm? How many of you have seen randomized algorithms before? Some example of randomized algorithm. What is a randomized algorithm? Any examples? Any randomized algorithm? What is a randomized algorithm? And if you have seen any randomized algorithm somewhere in some course or some other courses. Why did you take this course basically? What do you think randomized algorithm is? What is a randomized algorithm? What do you expect in this course?
Sir, an algorithm which uses a random variable,
Algorithm which gives us a random variable.
which uses a random variable in its implementation.
Okay. Algorithm that uses a random variable. Okay. So, any examples of such algorithms?
So in randomized quicksort, we select the pivot randomly.
Randomized quicksort. Okay. And the Sarthak says primality test. Yeah. Right. So, two examples of something that you've seen.
Sir,
Quicksort.
are you writing on the screen?
Yeah. It's not visible, is it?
Uh, like, I'm not able to see anything except that after that Yadu was page that GitHub
Oh,
profile.
you can't see anything. Is it true for everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's not visible.
Oh, okay. So then let me just stop the sharing and try this. Now can you see what I'm writing?
Yes, sir, it's useful.
So, quicksort, primality testing. Any other examples? Anything else that you might have seen? So these are two good examples, right? Quicksort and primality testing. So what are the properties of these algorithms? So these two are slightly different types of algorithms, right? Quicksort and primality testing are slightly different sorts of algorithms. Right? So what happens if you actually use randomness? So a randomized algorithm is an algorithm which is going to use some randomness, right? At some point in the algorithm, it will not, the next step will be decided by tossing a coin. The algorithm will toss a coin, and if it's head, it will do something. If it is tails, it will do something else. Okay. So, what is the randomization that is used in Quicksort?
Pivot.
It's a pivot element.
Okay. You choose a pivot element at random. Right? But then, if you choose a pivot element at random, how does it affect the algorithm? What happens to the algorithm? Like typically, if you just you make a randomized choice, it's possible that you make an error, right? So what happens in the case of Quicksort? What happens if you make random choices? What is the effect on the algorithm?
So the time complexity can change depending on what sample you take.
Yeah. So the time complexity can change, right? So in the case of Quicksort, if you make bad choices for the pivot, your algorithm can just go on for order n squared. Otherwise, you will finish it on n log. So what about primality testing? What happens when you make randomized? So I think Sarthak said about randomized primality testing, right? So what happens in the case of primality testing? Does it affect the performance? Yeah,
So
you make an error. Yeah, you make an error, right? It's possible that you make an error. So in the case of randomized primality testing, the algorithm, what happens is that you make random choices, but then you make an error. You will say some number is prime when it is not, right? So you can make an error. So these are two types. These are two good examples of randomized algorithm, right? The algorithm, instead of proceeding in a step-by-step deterministic manner, makes random choices. And based on the random choices, either it can affect its performance, or it can affects the the output of the algorithm. So our course is basically going to study such randomized algorithms. We're going to use a randomized algorithm, as far as we are concerned, is an algorithm that has access to unbiased random bits, and at every step of the algorithm, so every step of the algorithm depends on the previous steps as well as the random bits. And very importantly, the algorithm can make an error. Or it can affect its performance, as we saw. Right? So our goal would be to look at such algorithms where instead of the algorithm proceeding in a step-by-step manner, where we know what happens in the next step, given a current state of the algorithm, we can clearly say what will be the next step the algorithm makes. Whereas in a randomized algorithm, given the current state of the algorithm, its next state depends on the random bits that the algorithm uses. So there are a few things that we will need to think about before we start understanding these algorithms. The first thing is this thing here, right? The algorithm has access to unbiased random bits. Where do you get hold of unbiased random bits? Are there unbiased random bits in nature, right? I mean, you're going to design an algorithm, and hopefully you're going to, implement this algorithm in a computer program. You need to get hold of unbiased random bits. Do unbiased random bits exist in nature? Where do they come from? How do you get hold of an unbiased random bit? Right? The question is important because we are studying a new class of algorithms, new models of computation, and hopefully what we want is that it is also practical, that you can actually write algorithms and convert these algorithms into programs that give you good performance and so on. And in fact, it is true, right? I mean, there are, for instance, in the case of primality testing, most of the algorithms of primality testing are randomized because they have very good performance guarantees, even though they make an error. But then we want to get hold of unbiased random bits. In fact, we'll see in every algorithm that we'll see, we actually will assume that we have access to unbiased random bits. Where do they come from? How do you get hold of unbiased random bits?
In a program, one way you could do it is like you could take system time or something like that. That is like seemingly irrelevant to the program execution or something like that, and then you could use that to generate some random numbers.
So the question is, how do you get hold of it? See, the system time is seemingly random, but is it really random? So the question is important in another sense also, right? For instance, you need purely random bits, for instance, say in cryptography. You assume that you have random keys. Right? You have key which is used for encryption, and you assume that this key is completely random. Right? And
So
if it is, yeah.
By unbiased, we mean not pseudo-random.
By unbiased, I mean that it should be half. The probability that it is 0 or 1 should be exactly equal to half. Right? In fact, that is very important, right? I mean, if you see, we'll see it as we go along. We'll see that all our algorithm analysis will the way in which we will analyze the algorithms is such that we will assume we have unbiased random bits. And if you look at cryptography, for instance, right, you actually need to assume that you have random bits. Right? You have a random, you generate a random key. So how do you get hold of these random bits? At least it's an important question to ask at this point. Right? We are going to study the design of algorithms, which is going to use unbiased random bits. But then maybe we don't have any way to generate unbiased random bits. How does that affect the study of such algorithms? Right? Is this even a practical model of computation? Is it worthwhile studying such a model of computation if you can't even generate unbiased random bits, and then you say that I'm going to analyze algorithms assuming that I have unbiased random bits, with the hope that you will be able to implement these algorithms in actual computer systems? How do you guarantee that the performance analysis, the analysis that you did for the algorithm, the theoretical analysis that you did for the algorithm, will be matched in that implementation if you don't have unbiased random bits? So what I want to say is that it's an important question to ask whether you can actually get hold of unbiased random bits. But we will not answer this question in this course. Okay? We will assume that we will get hold of unbiased random bits. The nice thing is that some of the algorithms actually don't require unbiased random bits. Even if the random bits are not completely unbiased, you might still, the algorithm will run. And it is also possible to, so as Srikanth was saying, right? So he said that you can take the system time and then run some pseudo-random, do something and then get hold of some random numbers. Even if these are not completely unbiased, there is a way to get hold of unbiased random bits from these strings. Right? So there are a lot of things that you can do. So this is what I want to say is that it's a physically realizable model of computation. Right? It's worth studying because even though the assumptions that we make might not be actually true, maybe you might not get hold of that unbiased random bits. Still, even if you relax that the notion of the randomness, the algorithms that we study will still work. It's a worthwhile. So in that sense, it is a very valid model of computation, and that's something that is worth studying. That is something that that I just wanted to explain. We will not see about random bits, unbiased random bits. What happens if you don't have unbiased random bits and so on. We will not see a lot of that in the course, but it's something that is we have to keep in mind. Okay. So the course basically is about such algorithms, right? Randomized algorithms where you have an input and the algorithm keeps running, and every state of the algorithm depends on the previous state and the random coins that the random coins that it chooses. So now the next question is why study such algorithms? Why study randomized algorithms? Why study randomized algorithms? Right, your algorithm is going to have an error. Right, your algorithm is definitely might have some error and it might behave badly and so on. So why study randomized algorithms? Why do you want to? Yeah.
They may be simple to implement. Also, their efficiency may be high. For example, primality testing. It is very hard to get a deterministic algorithm that performs better than.
Okay, so that is one. That's one thing that is there. So one is that typically randomized algorithms. So randomized algorithms sometimes are more efficient than deterministic algorithms. And the example is basically primality. The main example is actually primality. The randomized algorithm for primality would run in something like linear or a little bit of quadratic or so on, and the deterministic algorithm is has an exponent of something like 6 or 7. That's the best that we know. Right? So in some cases, in some sense, in many cases, randomized algorithms are more efficient than deterministic algorithms. Even though you have both randomized and deterministic algorithms for the same problem, the randomized algorithms are typically more efficient, even if they make an error. Right? The error can be actually reduced without spending too much time. Without the loss of efficiency, you can still improve the guarantees of the algorithm. Right? We said that the randomized algorithm can make an error, but then there are ways to repeat an algorithm and so on, such that its error goes down significantly without affecting its efficiency. So that way, randomized algorithms are nice. And in some cases, randomized algorithms are very easy to explain. So this comes to the implementation. Sometimes randomized algorithms can be very simple to explain. Simple to explain would also mean that it's simple to implement. But it will be simple to explain, but not necessarily simple to prove that it is correct. It's indeed doing the job that it is meant to do. Right? In many cases, so we will see examples. We will see problems for which we have very complicated deterministic algorithms, or we don't even know deterministic algorithms, for which there are very, very simple randomized algorithms. So that is one other thing. So, and in some cases, randomization is unavoidable. Can you think of some places where, I don't know if you have seen, but can you think of some places where randomization might be unavoidable? In some sense, you cannot hope to have a deterministic algorithm. Okay, so we will not see it. We will not describe much of it right now. But so you could think of one example could be, say, say algorithms on say big data. You have a huge amount of data which you want to process and you want to work with, but running your deterministic algorithm, looking at the entire input and running an algorithm is not feasible at all. It could be very large graph, or a stream of a large array of strings or something. Like for instance, you have say you look at the Twitter feeds or something, and you want to somehow analyze some patterns and statistics about those feeds. It's practically impossible to have any efficient deterministic algorithm, and randomization is almost unavoidable in some cases. We will not see examples of such algorithms in this course. Maybe in some advanced course we might see it, but in some cases it's completely unavoidable. So these are some of the things why randomization is useful to study. Okay. So any questions so far? All right. So let's start with a simple. So before we get into the actual course contents and so on, let me just outline some administrative matters related to the course so that we can get that out of the way. So have you all? The course web page is up. You can actually go to the web page, and the details are written there. So the reference textbooks for the course is available there. I think it's some of them are available on in the library, and others I think you might be able to find it online. But more importantly, I'll just go over the activities associated with the course and the grading policy and so on. So you will have problem sets. We have about 5 of them. 5 sets, and we will take the best 4 of 5. And these will, I think, this is for 40% of your grade. Okay. And so the assignments will be typically problem sets which contains say 5 to 6 problems which you will have to submit within 10 days of being assigned. But you are allowed to collaborate with your friends in the sense that you are allowed to discuss the questions with your classmates, but whatever you write should be your own work. So there are a few constraints. One is that, so to limit the collaboration, every problem in the problem set, only 2 people can discuss with each other. So if A is discussing with B, then B cannot discuss that same problem with C. And the discussion, you should not write anything down, right? Just to make sure that you don't end up writing solutions together. When you discuss a problem, you are not supposed to write anything down. So you can have a phone call, you can have a Google Meet, but there should be no written, nothing should be written during it. You can discuss ideas, but no solutions should be discussed. You cannot read out your solution also. And you should not write down anything during the discussion. You can discuss, but don't write anything down. Go back and write the solutions on your own. Every question at most 2 people can discuss, and so that you don't have to think about everything on your own, but you'll have to write the solutions on your own. You can discuss the ideas, but write the solutions on your own. That I'll describe it in more detail once I give out the first problem set. Is that clear? Is that clear? So that is one thing. The other thing is there will be a small scribing part to this course. Scribing basically means that you will have to, write down and LaTeX the lectures that are being held. So currently the registration for this course is around 10 or 12, in which case the plan is that every student scribes 1 week's worth of lecture. So that you have to do once in the semester. Say someone chooses next week to be the scribe for the next week's lecture, then they just scribe it for that week, and then they don't have any work after that. Right? So it's 1 week's worth of lectures. It's just done once a semester. After that, you don't have that. So you have to listen to the lectures. You can go back. These videos are recorded and will be put up online. So you can go back, read through the go through the lecture videos, read through the notes, and then write the scripts. So that is 5% of the grade. Then there will be a course reading. Okay. So this is for 20%, and this is in groups of 3. Groups of at most 3. So there's a set of topics that I will give and a couple of papers for each topic, and you can basically go over topics and decide which topic you want, and you can form groups of at most 3. Read a couple of papers, write a small report, and report in the sense 2 to 3 pages maximum, and give a presentation in front of the class. So if you want, you can do this as on your own. You can just say that you don't want to form a group, and you can do it on your own. But I will not recommend it. Right? I would recommend groups of size 2, at least 2, or at most 3. Right? I don't think you should do it alone, because it will involve a lot of work. If there are many 3 of you, then you can divide the work. One person can only need to read only one part of the paper and can describe it to someone else. Right? So this will be a group assignment. Okay. Just that the report you will have to write on what you read rather than. So that will be individual. The report will be done individually, but the reading you can do together in groups of size at least. The details of this project, the course reading, I will describe within a week or so, after everything has normalized and I know how many people are attending the lectures and so on. I'll give a list of topics. You are also welcome to choose a topic of your choice. Right? If you have something else that you want to read, that is also fine. But I'll have a list of topics and a couple of papers in each topic which you can go over and read. So that is the course reading part, and then you have the mid-sem and end-sem. Right? Mid-sem, I think, is, I forget just a minute. Mid-sem is, which was mid-sem, I don't remember. I think mid-sem was 15. Right? So this will be like a take-home exam, but not too long. Right? And finally, an end-sem plus a viva, which is for 20%. Right? So that again will be a take-home exam, and the viva will be after the semester. It is just a 15-20 minute viva where we will just go through the topics that we covered in the course. Any questions so far regarding the evaluation, the course, the activities, or anything? Any questions so far?
No.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah. Siddharth.
Yeah. Yes, sir. This course reading will happen like at the end of the semester, or like?
No. I'll give you the list within a week or 2, and then you can start off all.
Okay, sir.
It will be spread out through the semester. So, and if you have groups of at most 3, then all of you need not read everything. You can divide the work and discuss, and if you want, you can do it on your own, but I will not recommend.
Okay, sir.
Anything else? Okay. So then let's start with a simple. So we said what are randomized algorithms in a very slightly vague manner. So let's start with some simple example. So let's start with this following toy problem. So let's start with that. So say you are given, you have with you a polynomial p of x of degree at most. So polynomial is basically this summation of ci x power I, where I goes from 0 to 2. This is a polynomial. You're given a polynomial and you want to factorize it. So you want to factorize the polynomial. So it's fairly hard to factorize polynomials. Maybe it's a very complicated, large polynomial with many terms and so on, and you don't know how to do it. So now your friend comes along, gives you a polynomial, call it q of x, which is something like q1 of x times q2 of x times qr of x, and claims that Q of x is the factorization of P of x. Okay. So you have a polynomial P of x, which is of degree at most d, and you want to factorize it, you don't know how to do it. And someone comes and claims, gives you a bunch of polynomials and says that this is the factorization of P of x. Now you want to verify whether this is indeed correct. You want to verify your friend's claim. How would you do it? What is the most straightforward way to do it?
Substitute the roots in P of x and check if it's 0.
Substitute the roots of P of x. So maybe it is you don't know how to compute the roots. Right? Maybe
So
you don't know how to compute the roots.
Just evaluate both at some set of points and then check if they are equal.
Some set of points.
Yeah, I mean, like if P of x equal to Q of x, then you could choose some value of x and then evaluate both.
Okay.
Sir, we can do like a long division, like you take P of x and do long division with Q1, Q2 up to Qr and check if the remainder is 0.
But that will only show that these are factors of P of x. So Sarthak says the most straightforward thing, right? Multiply all the polynomials, right? Just multiply Q1, Q2, Q up till Qr and see whether they match P of x term by term. Right? Surely that should be sufficient. You multiply them, multiply it out. I mean, it might not be very easy to do, but just multiply it out. Do Q1 times Q2 times Qr. You get a polynomial and you check whether this polynomial is equal to P of x. That's the most straightforward way in which you will do it. Right? So that is the most straightforward way. Let's do it. So the most straightforward algorithm is to multiply out Q1, Q2 until Qr, okay, and check if it matches P of x. The only problem with this would be, I mean, the straightforward algorithm, the only problem is that you might end up having a lot of terms which might cancel off and finally get P of x. Right? You can have very simple polynomials P of x which have very large factorizations and so on. Also, it's possible that all the roots of P of x are not real also. These are real polynomials, but not all roots of P of x are real. So some of these Q1x might be of the form x minus a or something. Some of them might be irreducible polynomials and so on. So the most straightforward algorithm is just to multiply it out everything. And that definitely, you can be sure that, if they match, then it's a factorization, otherwise it's not. Is that okay? So now let's look at a randomized algorithm for this, which is going to make things much easier for us. So let's look at a randomized algorithm. So the straightforward algorithm at least was not very good because we had to multiply out terms. There could be terms that are when you multiply it out, you might have many number of terms which then have to be cancelled off before you get P of x. That is why it was not very efficient. It's still, actually, if you think about it, it's not too bad. It's still polynomial time if you want to think about it. But let's look at a much more simpler algorithm. And this algorithm is definitely going to use randomization, which means that we will make an error. So this means that there is a probability of error. What it means is that the algorithm we have will be of this form, right? If indeed P of x is if Q of x is the factorization of P of x, we will say, okay, that is correct. But it is also possible that we will say Q of x is the factorization of P of x when it isn't the case. So we're going to make some errors. And the idea of this algorithm is very simple. So let's look at this polynomial R of x. which is P of x minus Q of x. Now, what can you say about R of x? R of x is 0 if and only if Q of x is the factorization of P of x. Okay, that's the only way in which this polynomial is 0. And let's look at the case when R of x is not equal to 0. What can you say when R of x is not equal to 0? What is the degree of R of x?
At most D.
Degree of R of x is at most D. Right? That you can verify, right? Because P of x is at most D. If the leading coefficients, the leading powers in Q1, Q2 up to QR, if you add them up, it is greater than D, then you know that it's not a prime factorization. So you can always assume that the degree of R of x is at most D. Right? What does that suggest? Does that suggest something? So there is some theorem which if you don't know, it's fine. But there is something known as the fundamental theorem of algebra. Do you know what this is? Do you know the statement of this theorem? There are many, I think there are different ways
A
in which
polynomial with degree D has exactly D roots if you count for multiplicity.
Yeah. So a real polynomial. So let's look at real polynomials. A real polynomial P or R of degree at most D has at most D real roots. So if you take a real polynomial of degree at most D, then it has at most D real roots. So what is a root? So what is the root of a polynomial? It is a element A such that R of A is equal to 0. That is the root of a polynomial. So if this polynomial R of x is not equal to 0, we know that the degree of R of x is at most D. Then you know that R of x has at most D real roots. Okay. So now here is a randomized algorithm. Okay, if you want to check, what you do is you look at the set S, which are the elements 1, 2, 3 up till 100D. So now suppose you randomly select an element from this. Randomly choose an element from S. What is the probability that it will be a root? What is the chance that if you randomly choose an element A from S, what happens? How many? So let me ask this: what is the number of A in S such that R of A is equal to 0?
Maximum D.
This is at most D, right? This is what the fundamental theorem of algebra says. If you have R as a polynomial of degree at most D, then if you take the set 1, 2, 3 up till 100D, the number of elements such that R of A is equal to 0 is at most D. So if you recall your classical standard, the probability that you've studied in high school, if you randomly choose an element from S, what is the probability that R of A is equal to 0? What is this probability?
At most 1 by 100.
It's at most 1 by 100, right? What is the probability? It is the number of times you look at the possible outcomes that are in your favor and look at the total possible outcome, which is 100t. So this is just at most 1 over 100. So here is a very simple algorithm for checking, verifying whether your the polynomial qx is a factorization of px. What you do is you choose a number uniformly at random from the set 1 to 100D, and you evaluate the polynomial r, and you check whether it is 0 or not. Okay. So what can you say? If so, if r of x is indeed equal to 0, then for every a in S, r of a is equal to 0. And if r of a is not equal to 0, then the probability that when you choose an element a from S, r of a is equal to 0 is at most 1 over 100. So here is my algorithm for verifying the factorization. What do I do? So my randomized algorithm is the following. Choose a uniformly at random from S, check, or if r of a is equal to 0, then answer that q of x is a factorization of p of x. Else, answer no. So here is one algorithm. So notice this is much simpler than the algorithm that we have before. The reason is that it is much more time consuming to multiply out polynomials and then cancelling off the terms, rather than just evaluating a polynomial at a set of points. In fact, at one point. So then what you have is that your algorithm can make an error. When does the algorithm make an error? In what scenario will the algorithm make an error?
That randomly chosen point is a root of the difference r of x.
Yes, it's a root of r of x, right? In particular, you will make an error only if r of x is q of x is not the prime factorization of p of x. If q of x was indeed the prime factorization of p of x, then you will not make an error. Your algorithm will never make an error. It's only when q of x is not a prime factorization of p of x, you can make an error if one of the elements that you chose, the element that you randomly chose, was indeed the root of the polynomial. So this is an example of a randomized algorithm. So suddenly you have a problem where you need to do a lot of algebraic manipulations that are somehow reduced to doing a much more simpler operation. So this is a randomized algorithm, and what we can say is that this has the following guarantee, right? So suppose that p of x is equal to, say, q1 of x into q2 of x into qr of x, then the probability that the algorithm makes a mistake is 0, right? Because it will always answer correctly. Now, if p of x is not equal to q1 of x till qr of x, then the probability that the algorithm makes a mistake, right? What is a mistake that an algorithm can make? It will say that it is a prime factorization when it is not. So the probability that it will make a mistake is at most 1 over 100. This is not a bad, it's not a bad error probability. It's very small. It's like 1 in 100. You can make it even smaller by taking a larger set S. Right? So suddenly, using randomization, we have got an algorithm which can make an error, but not with very high probability, and yet the algorithm has become much more simple. Any questions on this algorithm? So these are the typical sort of examples that we're going to see. This is just a standard simple example. This is a toy example, right? Because actually, given p of x and q of x, it is even the deterministic algorithm is efficient, right? Randomization is not giving you anything extra, just that it's making the algorithm simple. But now let's just extend this slightly and ask a slightly different question. Let's look at a slightly different problem, which is sometimes known as polynomial identity testing. Polynomial identity testing, or PID. So here what you have is that you're given a polynomial P. It's a multivariate polynomial. It has n variables, and degree is d. So this is n variate polynomial. How do n variate polynomials look like? I mean, what do I mean by this? You have a polynomial, so p1 x1 to xn would be something like summation ci, then you have x1 to the ei, x2 to the e1i, e2i, xn to the eni, right? Where these eni are basically integers. So this is what is a multivariate polynomial. You have some coefficient. This is a real coefficient, and this term here, this is what is referred to as a monomial. This polynomial. So this is what is an n-variate polynomial. So how many monomials can be there for a degree d n-variate polynomial? If you have a degree d n-variate polynomial, how many monomials can be there? So this is your discrete math question, standard discrete math question. If you have the number of
n plus d choose d.
N plus d choose d, is it, or n plus d minus 1? Anyway, you are the right track. So what is the number of monomials in a degree d n-variate polynomial? So this is a simple exercise. You can just check what it is. So anyway, so I think what Raghu said, I think, yeah. So I think that is Sarthak has said n plus d minus 1 choose d minus 1. I think that is so we can just verify that. It's the standard discrete math question that we have seen. But the PID problem is this. So you're given a polynomial P. Check if P is the zero polynomial. What does it mean? Zero polynomial means that it is, all coefficients for all the monomials are zero. You're given the polynomial P and you want to check whether it is a zero polynomial or not. It is very similar to what we saw earlier, right? I mean, in the case of the factorization, what we did was that you have R of x and you are checking whether R of x was indeed a zero polynomial or not. Similarly, you have a polynomial P and you're checking whether P is a zero polynomial or not. So the question is, how is P given? So suppose I write down P explicitly, then there is nothing to check, right? If I give you all the monomials and then you can just check whether these monomials are zero or not. There is nothing very interesting. So assume that the polynomial is given as a computer program. Okay? You have a computer program, okay, which is supposedly computing a polynomial. In the sense that if you give it values, if you give the computer program values for x1 to xn, it will output P of x1 to xn. Suppose you're given this program rather than the polynomial explicitly, you're given a computer program that is supposedly computing this polynomial P. And you want to check whether P is identically zero or not. This slightly generalizes the toy problem that we saw just before. what we will see is we will look at a randomized algorithm for this problem. Right? We'll borrow ideas from the toy example. We will understand those that ideas involved there. We will extend those ideas, and we'll try to solve this problem and give a randomized algorithm. And what makes this problem really interesting is that we don't know any deterministic algorithm for this problem. Currently, there are no known deterministic algorithms for this problem, and it is a very central question which connects a lot of different other topic questions in different other areas. So we will explain more about this problem and the algorithm and so on in the next class. The funny thing is, the randomized algorithm is an extremely simple algorithm. It's again something that you like what you saw for the toy example. You're going to randomly choose a set of points and evaluate it and see whether it is real or not. But we don't know of any deterministic algorithm for this problem. So that's another example of the power of randomization. That's something that we will see in the next class. That's on Wednesday. Are there any questions? Any questions?
Sir, in the previous question, we can sample from the real numbers instead of the set S, right? And we can get a zero probability bound.
But how do you sample from the real numbers, right? So the question is, how do you sample from the set of uniformly from the set of real numbers? Even if you're sampling, you can't get a zero error on both sides. Right? You can still make an error. In the sense, if you're sampling, then there's a chance that you will sample incorrectly.
No, I'm not saying zero error, but the probability bound will be zero.
Probability bound will be zero. For
because the chance that a randomly selected real number is the root is zero.
Why is that? So from which set are you sampling?
Real numbers.
No, then it's different. Like, first of all, how do you sample from the real numbers? And the analysis is going to be slightly different, right? I mean, it's no longer a discrete set that you're sampling from, right? So the analysis will not be correct. Right? So when you study probability for continuous, when you study continuous random variables, it's slightly different. Right? Even though every point there is probability mass is zero or something, you can't. So we'll come to that. Okay? So that's not exactly correct. We'll come to that. That will be going ahead a little bit. So we'll come to that. So it's a good question. First, that we don't know how to sample from such a set. That is also another thing. We will, since we are trying to implement this as an actual computer program, right? If you want an algorithm, you typically want discrete sets. You want to work with discrete sets mostly. Any other questions?
I have one. So I was maybe like I'm speaking, but I just had a doubt. Like when you defined randomized algorithms, you considered random bits, and but what I feel is like if you sample random bits, you will only be able to sample from a set containing like 2 power n objects.
Sure. Right.
Is it possible to sample like uniformly from something like 100?
Sure, you can, right? So when you say so basically what you will do is if you want to sample uniformly from 0 to 100, you will sample say log 100 bits. Right? That will give you a number, and you take the corresponding number that will be uniformly distributed in the set 1.
But unless 100 is a divisor of that, it won't be uniform.
That is not very, it's just a small technical thing that you can work around. It's not very...
okay. I was like asking that. And then another thing, like the last problem, isn't it possible to just, is other examples where you could just expand all the coefficients and then add them?
So that is the thing that, Sarthak and Raghu were saying, right? I mean, look at the number of coefficients that you will end up with. Right? It is n plus d minus 1 choose d minus 1. So you have an n-variate polynomial of large degree.
Yes, it is large, but at least there is some...
Sure. There is an algorithm. It will not be efficient. Sure, there is a deterministic algorithm.
Okay.
There is an algorithm. Because in most problems that we will see, we are looking at a finite domain. I mean, the solution space is always finite. It's just that it is large. Right? I mean, The whole problem with combinatorial explosion is that you have a solution space that is very large and you don't know how to search in that space. So you always have a number. It's just that it's not efficient. Any other questions? Okay, so then let's stop for now. So Srikanth and Keshav, can you just stay back? I just want to talk about this. Thanks.